Welcome you all to the session on corporate social responsibility. I am Dr. Shulagna Sarkar from Institute of Public Enterprise, and we also have Dr. Poonam Singh from Institute of Public Enterprise, who will also be talking on the same corporate social responsibility. To start with today's session, I would like to first explain what is CSR, the various theories in CSR, and the need for CSR and the relationship of CSR and sustainable development. CSR has been explained by various researchers and practitioners in their own way and conveniences. Yet, the fulcrum of the practice of CSR in organization extends to corporate obligations and also includes multiple stakeholders such as stockholders, workers, the community, and the natural environment, and the outcomes of policies and programs directed towards those relationships. CSR is a concept being concerned with treating the stakeholders of the firm ethically or in a socially responsible manner. Stakeholders exist both within a firm and outside. Consequently, behaving socially responsibly will increase the human development of stakeholders both within and outside the organizations. Corporate social responsibility is an entry point for understanding a number of firm-related and societal issues and responding to them in a firm's business strategy. However, it may be noted that there is a universal and a prominent view on protecting environment and stakeholders' interest. There are various definitions which are there. I would like to share some of the prominent definitions accepted worldwide. Commission of the European Communities explains CSR as a concept that an enterprise is accountable for its impact on all relevant stakeholders. It is the continuing commitment by business to behave fairly and responsibly and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workforce and their families, as well as the local community and society at large. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development has defined CSR as the commitment of business to contribute to sustainable economic development, working with employees, their families, the local community, and society at large to improve their quality of life. Let us now discuss the meaning and origin of corporate responsibility. CSR began with the focus on the role of business leaders, particularly on how they manage their organizations with a view to society and how they gave back local communities. In the 1950s, the focus of CSR shifted through academic debate about what organizations should do to support the society rather than that of individuals. The CSR agenda of organizations is related to profit orientation, yet there are two perspectives which are mainly socio-economic and classical school of thoughts. Classical view or shareholder approach holds the view that CSR is for maximization of profit, and socio-economic school of thought which believes that businesses owe something to the society that supports them and that the debt to the society is greater than any debt to individual member of the society. Levitt researched work during the 1958s could have been credited which sets the agenda for the debate about the social responsibility of business in his Harvard Business Review article, The Dangers of Social Responsibility, in which he cautions that government's job is not business and business's job is not government. Friedman in 1970 expressed the same sentiment and added that mere existence of CSR was a signal of an agency problem within the firm. An agency theory perspective implies that CSR is a misuse of corporate resources that would be better spent on value-added internal projects or returned to the shareholder. It also suggests that CSR is an executive perk in the sense that managers use CSR to advance their careers or other personal agendas. What is required is a holistic view which ensures giving back to the society to the extent damage or harm is caused. Businesses exist not only for individual or owners' growth, but there are numerous benefits to the society at large. The concept of existence of business causes increase in employment, providing livelihood to the employees. The manufactured goods or services are utilized or consumed by the people in the society. Weather and Chandler in 2006 emphasized that there are so many variables that it is impossible to prescribe what mix of responsibilities any organization faces. Organization should not look for universal definition but should instead build strategies around the perspective of their shareholders. Organizations report on their social, environmental, and economic impact to reach out to and engage with stakeholder groups. Reporting also enhances a company's ability to integrate CSR and sustainability into its business and decision processes through the identification of material issues, risks, and opportunities. There is rather little literature on the relation between environmental and social measures and achievement of long-term economic goals. There are various theories behind CSR. Under the natural rights and social contract perspective, there have been two main strands on ethical theory in the Western world. Consequentialism refers to theories of ethics that assesses right and wrong in terms of the consequences of action. It most famously includes the utilitarianism theories of Bentham and Mill, but also embraces the moral philosophy of Adam Smith as well as that of the Hobbes and Hume. Many notions about the business-society relationship reflects utilitarianism. The term refers to the capacity of actions to achieve beneficial outcomes. In a utilitarian theory of justice, actions are neither good nor bad in themselves, but only in terms of what they bring about, captured in Bentham's 1789 research view that the good acts are those that bring the greatest happiness to the largest number of people. Non-consequentialism, on the other hand, refers to the utilitarianism is often criticized for its apparent claim that individual rights can be subverted to the greater good of society, and that, therefore, people are to be treated as means to an end. For example, applying utilitarianism in the context of corporate responsibility makes it possible to justify the laying of large number of employees and reducing the wages of workers, provided that these acts maximize the total happiness of the majority of those affected by the company. Those who expect corporate responsibility to be about active citizenship and doing more than paying taxes, obeying the law, and engaging in philanthropy would certainly hope to see more active engagement with the society than this. Environmental ethics, on the other hand, says it is highly evident in aspects of corporate responsibility such as sustainability and animal rights. The recurring concerns that include the rights of non-human species and ecosystem, the rights of future generations, and the issues of equity and justice. Environmental ethics has also allowed sustainability to be seen as an ethical issue, something that demands that we extend ideas of moral considerations in terms of space and time. There are three approaches to the CSR framework. First, shareholder approach. Let us discuss shareholder approach. Milton Friedman expressed the socially responsibility of business is to increase its profits, but the doctrine of social responsibility taken seriously would extend the scope of political mechanism to every human activity. It does not differ in philosophy from the most explicitly collectivist doctrine. It differs only by professing to believe that collectivist ends can be attained without collectivist means. Stakeholder approach is the second one, which says that earlier detailed by Edward Freeman in 1984 expresses that must be distinguished from a stakeholder concept. The latter owns a share of the corporation. On the other hand, a stakeholder is any group of or individual that has a vital interest in the doing of the corporation. Hence, the stockholder is a stakeholder of the corporation whose vital interest at play is the share owned of the corporation and the money invested in this share. There are several other stakeholders of the corporation like employees, customers, suppliers, local community, surrounding government, the surrounding human and natural environment, and the corporate managers. Stakeholder theory requires that the corporation recognize and respect the vital interests of each of its surrounding stakeholder. This frequently issues in proposing stakeholder rights and assigning to other correlative duties to recognize and respect these rights. Stakeholder theory also requires that the corporation integrate interest wherever possible, mediate or broker conflicts between interests, and only trade off competing interests when absolutely necessary and when more conciliatory efforts have already been made and have failed. The third approach is Verheijen's alliance approach. Verheijen's alliance approach is similar to stakeholder approach. Yet, Verheyen makes two significant departures from the stakeholder approach. First, she uses moral imagination to distance the corporation from the problem-solving process. The lens of problem-solving refocuses on each of the other stakeholders. Second, the alliance approach sees the corporation as a part of system of interrelated and interdependent parts. Hence, each problem situation presents a system formed of corporation, owners, managers, employees, suppliers, customers, local communities, and government. Problems emerge from value conflicts within and between the constituent parts of the system. They are solved through the cooperation of the different constituents of the alliance. Now let us discuss the corporate social responsibility hierarchy. Carroll from the University of Georgia was one of the first academics to make distinction between different kinds of organization responsibilities. He referred to his distinction as a firm's pyramid of corporate responsibility. Fundamentally, a firm's economic responsibility is to produce an acceptable return on its owner's investment. An important component of pursuing economic gain within a law-based society, however, is legal responsibility, a duty to act within the legal framework drawn up by the government and judiciary. Taken up one step further, a firm has ethical responsibility to do no harm to its stakeholder and within its operating environment. Finally, the firms have a discretionary responsibility which represents more proactive strategic behavior that can benefit the firm and society or both. The next is the triple bottom line approach, which focuses on organizations not just on the economic value they add, but also on the environmental value and social value they add and destroy. The three lines represent society, the economy, and the environment. Society depends on the economy, and the economy depends on the global systems, whose health represents the ultimate bottom line. Now let us dwell on the areas and operational level of CSR. A socially responsible company is active in four main areas of community, environment, marketplace, and workplace. There are various operational levels of CSR as described by Wood in 1991, which are nothing but the institutional, individual, and organizational as well as global level. In institutional level, CSR is regarded as organizational legitimacy. As per the law of responsibility, it is evident that firms exercising power will eventually be held accountable by society. At this level, CSR can be best understood as a quest for organizational legitimacy. The individual level emphasizes CSR as a moral choices for managers. At the individual level, CSR is built by managerial discretion. The view of CSR at this level is strongly anchored in the business ethics literature. According to this view, managerial actions are not fully defined by the corporate policies and procedures. So, although managers are constrained by their work environment, they nonetheless have to weigh the moral consequences of the choices they make. At the organizational level, CSR is regarded as a stakeholder management. Freeman emphasized towards a new theory of the firm, social considerations are no longer outside of an organization but are part of its purpose of being. CSR thus becomes a question of stakeholder identification, involvement, and communication. Freeman and Villamori explained that the purpose of stakeholder management was to devise a framework to manage strategically the myriad groups that influence directly and indirectly the ability of a firm to achieve its objectives. On the global level, CSR is regarded as sustainable development. Hawkins and Morsing elaborated the fourth level to the analysis, which is characterized as global. The Brundtland Commission of 1987 systematically emphasized the link between poverty, environment degradation, and economic development. Its definition of sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the future. Need for CSR. CSR plays a vital role in the sustainable existence of any business organization. There are various reasons to substantiate the need for CSR. Business has to exist in a society and a societal setting. It is therefore must not go against the interest of the society. There is an integral relationship between the business and society. No society can function without rule of law. Since laws are framed to regulate the functioning of all, including the conduct of business, it is imperative that the laws are followed by the business. The social order is conditioned on the principle of the greatest good of maximum number of people. The business cannot ignore the utilitarian principle in order to gain advantage for a minority. So, it is the duty of the business houses to keep the welfare of the majority of people in their view and desist from causing injury to the environment. With the onset of globalization and the emergence of a networking society, CSR has become a global issue. While conducting businesses with the other countries, the company has not only to adhere to the local laws, but also the laws of the host state. Now let us understand the concept of sustainable development. Sustainable development is the development that meets the need of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sustainable development involves an enduring and balanced approach to economic activity, social progress, and environmental responsibility. To make CSR sustainable, it is necessary to keep the business interest of the company uppermost in mind. Now my colleague Ms. Poonam Singh will be speaking on the various acts and the legal provisions on CSR. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shulagna. And I am Ms. Poonam Singh, Head Center for Corporate Social Responsibility at the Institute of Public Enterprise, Hyderabad. In this part of the session, we will deal with the CSR provisions and guidelines for Indian companies. You will all agree that corporate social responsibility is one of the most deliberated and researched area today. One of the reasons being that is today we have a CSR mandate which has changed the way business has been carried in the country. With this background, let's discuss the various provisions and guidelines on CSR. The various provisions and guidelines include the social, environmental, and economic responsibility of business by Ministry of Corporate Affairs, released in July 2011. The CSR mandate that the world is talking about will be discussed under Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013, effective from 1st April 2014. We will also throw some light on the CSR and sustainability guidelines for public sector enterprises in India, effective from 1st of April 2014. Let's first discuss the environmental and economic responsibilities of business, the Ministry of Corporate Affairs guidelines released in July 2011. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs had released voluntary guidelines on CSR in 2009 as the first step towards mainstreaming the concept of business responsibilities. Keeping in view the feedback from stakeholders, it has decided to review the same with a more comprehensive set of guidelines that encompasses social, environmental, and economical responsibilities of business. The guidelines are applicable to all such entities and are intended to be adopted by them comprehensively, as they raise the bar in a manner that makes their value-creating operations sustainable. It needs to be emphasized that all principles are equally important and non-divisible. It would have to adapt each of the 9 principles in their entirety rather than picking and choosing what might suit them. The guidelines have been articulated in the form of 9 principles with the core elements to actualize each of the principles. It urges businesses to embrace the triple bottom line approach, whereby its financial performance can be harmonized with the expectation of the society, the environment, and many stakeholders it interfaces with in a sustainable manner. Let's highlight and discuss the 9 principles which form the core of these MCA guidelines. The first principle states that businesses should conduct and govern themselves with ethics, transparency, and accountability, which means the principle recognizes that ethical conduct in all the functions and processes is the cornerstone of responsible business. Under this principle, there are 6 core elements. Coming to principle 2. Principle 2 states that businesses should provide goods and services that are safe and contribute to sustainability throughout their life cycle. Hence, the principle emphasizes that in order to function effectively and profitably, businesses should work to improve the quality of life of the people. Under this principle, we also have 6 core elements which actualizes the principle 2. Coming to principle 3. The principle 3 states that businesses should promote the well-being of all employees. Principle encompasses all policies and practices relating to the dignity and well-being of employees engaged within a business or in its value chain, actualized by 8 core elements. Coming to principle 4. Principle 4 states that businesses should respect the interest of and be responsive towards all stakeholders, especially those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, and marginalized. According to this principle, the principle recognizes that businesses have a responsibility to think and act beyond the interest of its stakeholders to include all their stakeholders. This principle is actualized by 4 core elements. Coming to principle 5. Principle 5 emphasizes that businesses should respect and promote human rights. The principle takes into account the corporate responsibility to respect human rights as referred in the United Nations Protect, Respect, Remedy framework, actualized by 5 core elements. Now let's look at principle 6. Principle 6 states that business should respect, protect, and make efforts to restore the environment. The principle recognizes that environmental responsibility is a prerequisite for sustainable economic growth and for the well-being of the society. This principle is also actualized by 7 core elements. Coming to principle 7. Principle 7 states that businesses, when engaged in influencing public and regulatory policy, should do so in a responsible manner. Hence, the principle recognizes that businesses operate within the specified legislative and policy frameworks prescribed by the government, which guide their growth and also provide for certain desirable restrictions and boundaries, actualized by 2 core elements. Coming to principle 9. Principle 9 states that businesses should support inclusive growth and equitable development. The principle reiterates that business prosperity and inclusive growth and equitable development are interdependent, actualized by 2 core elements. Coming to the last, principle 9. Principle 9 states that businesses should engage with and provide value to their customers and consumers in a responsible manner. This principle is based on the fact that the basic aim of a business entity is to provide goods and services to its consumer in a manner that create value for both. This principle is actualized by 6 core elements. After going through the 9 principles that form the basis of the MCA guidelines released in 2011, the guideline has also set up some very important component that will guide to the successful implementation of principles and core elements. Let's look into this component. The first component is leadership. It states that the chairman, CEO, owner, manager should play a proactive role in convincing the board, top management, and staff within the business that adopting these principles is crucial for success. The board and the senior management need to ensure that the principles are fully understood across the organization and comprehensively executed. The second component includes integration. These principles and the core elements must be embedded in the business policies and strategies emanating from the core business purpose of the organization. For this to happen, these must align with each business internal values and or must provide clear business benefits. The third important component include engagement. Building strong relationships and engaging with stakeholders on a consistent, continuous basis is crucial. The fourth and a very important component includes reporting. Implementation process includes disclosure by companies of their impact on society and environment to their stakeholders. It is crucial for each business to assess how adoption for these guidelines will provide a business benefit in the short as well as long run. After having discussed and highlighted the prominent features of the guideline provided by Ministry of Corporate Affairs in 2011, let's go and discuss the provisions of CSR under the Companies Act 2013. We all know that the Companies Act 2013 has mandated CSR, and it's for the first time that we see CSR as an integral component of the Companies Act, and that highlights the importance of the subject and the concept. Section 135 of the Companies Act deals with the CSR provisions. Section 135 contains 5 subsections, and Schedule 7 of the Companies Act lists out the CSR activities. Let's discuss each of the subsection one by one. Under the Section 135(1), which talks about CSR committee, the subsection states that each company having a net worth of rupee 500 crore or more, or a turnover of rupees 1000 crore or more, or a net profit of rupees 5 crore or more during any financial year shall constitute a corporate social responsibility committee of the board consisting of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one director shall be an independent director. So the Section 135 highlights the need of constituting a CSR committee for companies which qualifies under the 3 prominent criteria for CSR. Coming to the subsection 135(2). Section 135(2) talks about disclosure of the CSR committee constitution in the board's report. It states that the board's report under subsection 3 of section 134(0) shall disclose the composition of the corporate social responsibility committee. So section 135(1) talks about constitution of the CSR committee, while section 135(2) talks about the disclosure of the composition of the CSR committee. Coming to section 135(3). 135(3) talks about the responsibility of the CSR committee. Section 135 says that the CSR committee shall formulate and recommend to the board a CSR policy which shall indicate the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified in Schedule 7. The CSR committee will also recommend the amount of expenditure to be incurred on the activities, and third, the CSR committee will monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. Hence, section 135(1) talks about CSR committee constitution. Section 135(2) talks about disclosure of the composition of the CSR committee, and section 135(3) talks about the responsibility of the CSR committee. Coming to section 135(4). 135(4) talks about the responsibility of the board, and the section 135(4) states that the board of every company referred to in subsection 1 shall after taking into account the recommendations made by the CSR committee, approve the CSR policy for the company and disclose the content of such policy in its report, and also place it on the company's website if any, and in such manner as prescribed. Hence, we can infer from the section 135(4) that all companies that qualify under CSR should have a CSR policy approved by the board and should be disclosed in the company website. Coming to section 135(5), which talks about CSR expenditure. The section 135(5) states that the board of every company referred to in subsection 1 shall ensure that the company spends in every financial year at least 2% of the average net profit of the company made during 3 immediately preceding financial years. In pursuance of its corporate social responsibility policy, provided that the company shall give preference to the local area and areas around it where it operates for spending the amount earmarked for CSR activities, provided further that if the company fails to spend such amount, the board shall, in its report made under clause O of subsection 3 of section 135, specify the reasons for not spending the amount. So section 135(5) discusses or highlights the amount to be spent under CSR, wherein net profit means profit before tax. It also emphasizes that CSR money should be spent giving preference to local area, and this is a very valid reasoning because the maximum negative impact of the operation is also borne by area in and around the core area of operation. Section 135 is all about comply or explain. So if a company has not spent its CSR fund, it has to give the reason for why not the company is able to spend the money. Taking the discussion forward, under clause O of subsection 3 of section 134, it states that there shall be attached to statements laid before a company in a general meeting a report by its board of directors, which shall include the details about the policy developed and implemented by the company on CSR initiatives taken during the year. Now we move on to Schedule 7, which highlights the various activity that organization can take under CSR. The first include eradicating hunger, poverty, and malnutrition, promoting preventive health care and sanitation, and making available safe drinking water. The item 2 of Schedule 7 include promoting education, including special education and employment enhancing vocational skills, especially among children, women, elderly, and the differently able, and livelihood enhancement projects. The third item includes promoting gender equality, empowering women, setting up homes and hostels for women and orphans, setting up old age home, daycare centers, and such other facilities for senior citizens, and measures for reducing inequalities faced by socially and economically backward groups. The fourth item includes ensuring environmental sustainability, ecological balance, protection of flora and fauna, animal welfare, agroforestry, conservation of natural resources, and maintaining quality of soil, air, and water. The fifth item includes protection of national heritage, art and culture, including restoration of buildings and sites of historical importance and works of art, setting up public library, promotion and development of traditional arts and handicrafts. The sixth item includes measures for the benefit of armed forces veterans, war widows, and their dependents. The fifth item includes training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Paralympic sports, and Olympic sports. The eighth item includes contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund or any other fund set up by the central government for socio-economic development and relief and welfare of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes, other backward classes, minorities, and women. Ninth item include contribution of funds provided to technology incubators located within academic institutions which are approved by the central government. The 10th include rural development project, and a latest add-on is slum development. As we know that CSR today, we have a mandate, we have an act. Apart from the Schedule 135, there are also rules that has to be followed in the process of implementation of Section 135. I request all viewers to go and refer to the notification by the government with regards to the rule in regard to Section 135. Now, with the implementation of Section 135 making CSR mandatory, it's believed that nearly 4,000 plus companies will come under the CSR mandate, and there would be nearly 20,000 crores of money that would go into the social sector development area. If this is the likely future, we do understand there would be n numbers of implementation challenges, but it's also an opportunity to uplift the socio-economic status of the country. Now, what's the likely future? If we want to take the mandate forward, the best way of CSR implementation is the project. Any activity will qualify as a project when it includes the following. First, a project should have a baseline survey, which is also a need assessment survey. What does the society need? What are the priorities of the society? What are the conditions before the start of a project? That is what the baseline insight will give you. A project mode CSR activity will also have the duration of the project, the start day, the end day. It will also have the amount allocated to the project. Amount allocated to the project in the current financial year. It may be an ongoing project, it may be a long-term project. So what is the amount that the company is spending in the current year? The selection process of the implementing agency needs to be there. How have you selected the implementing agency? What is the mode of release of fund to the implementing agency? There has to be a proper monitoring and documentation process in place. There has to be a process of objective evaluation and finally impact assessment. What is the change that your CSR activity has created in the life of the stakeholders? What is its impact on the society? Now let's take some moment to discuss some important concept that needs to be implemented in the successful implementation of CSR project. The first aspect is the baseline or the need assessment. Before the start of a project, an organization should have a need assessment or a baseline which will tell you what is the need of the society. It will help the organization to differentiate between real and felt need. It will also tell the organization what is the current status in terms of socio-economic status. It also helps the organization to prioritize the need of the society, and it also helps the organization to select a CSR project in line with the societal need. So if we look into the definition of CSR, the definition of a baseline study defines the pre-operational exposure condition for the set of indicators that will be used to assess achievement of the outcomes and impact expressed in the CSR program's logical framework. When compared with the condition of the same indicators at some point during implementation, midterm evaluation, and post-operation implementation final evaluation. The baseline study forms the basis for a before and after assessment or a change over time assessment. Without baseline data to establish pre-operational conditions for outcomes and impact indicators, it is difficult to establish whether change at the outcome level has in fact occurred. So baseline is important to know whether your CSR activity has actually achieved the objective with which it was started and what is the impact that it has created on the society. The next very important concept is the impact assessment. Now, organizations have spent a lot of their CSR funds in a CSR activity, which is based on the need of the society. Now, once the activity has been completed, it is very important for the organization to know its impact, to know what is the change that the activity has created on the society, whether change is positive or negative. This can happen only through an impact assessment. So what is an impact assessment? Impact assessment is a continuous process and an important tool for assessing the consequences of possible and actual programs and present relevant evidence on the positive and negative efforts of CSR interventions. CSR evaluation program enables and facilitates organizational change and dramatic performance improvement through use of best practices, customer focus, and other external value-added perspective. Another very important concept is capacity building. Now, CSR is a new concept. It's not a new concept in true sense, but the CSR mandate is something new. Now, organizations have been asked to conduct CSR in a prescribed manner, in a specific manner. In the first year, 2014-15 was the first year, so organizations are struggling and there are a lot of implementation challenges. They don't have the structure in place. So one very, very important aspect is capacity building. So what is capacity building and what is its relevance in effective CSR implementation? Capacity building, also referred to as capacity development, is a conceptual approach to development that focuses on understanding the obstacles that inhibit people, governments, international organizations, and non-governmental organizations from realizing their development goals while enhancing the abilities that will allow them to achieve measurable and sustainable results. Capacity building initiative should also be included as a part of training so that interested employees who are not a part of CSR core team can also gain knowledge and expertise in the area of CSR and are involved in the CSR activities time to time. Having understood some of the important concepts which are so important in effective implementation of CSR, let's look into some of the ways in which organizations have structured their CSR. So some ways of structuring effective CSR, and we have listed out some 4. The first is delink it from business. The best example is Thermex. Thermex has turned its business of energy and environment solutions and focuses on imparting soft skills to youngsters from marginalized communities to make them more employable. The next structure or the next way is the link to business. A very good example is the Godrej Group. The Godrej Group has a beautician training program to help women find jobs in salon and turn entrepreneurs in the grooming business. Their familiarity with the company's product, Godrej hopes, will make them brand ambassadors for the group. The third technique or the third strategy would be India's pressing problem. Example, the Bharti Foundation runs 254 schools providing free primary and secondary education to rural children. The children spend a third of their time outside the classroom learning about environment, hygiene and sanitation playing sports, and inculcating a strong value system. The fourth technique is address the local community. A very good example is Ambuja Cement. Ambuja Cement's mobile health unit and cadre of local caregiver created in the 12 villages adjoining its plant in Chandrapur, Maharashtra, serve the people of about 16 villages, most of whom are well outside the company's purview of operation. Thus, we can finally conclude that CSR is a concept whereby companies integrate social and environmental concern in their business operations through continuous stakeholder engagement. The Indian approach to CSR has undertaken a tremendous change from philanthropy and charity to Companies Act 2013 of mandatory reporting. CSR has for the first time been recognized in the Companies Act. The latest Companies Act 2013 reflects on the importance of CSR as part of the firm's business strategy. There's a lot of discussion in the Indian corporate about the system and structure of implementation of CSR in the perspective of the Companies Act, as it is expected that there will be a huge amount of money that will flow in the social sector. In the given situation, the CSR should act as a channel to facilitate deeper thoughts and longer-term strategies for addressing some of the country's most persistent social, economic, and environmental problems. Companies need to integrate CSR with their strategies, as CSR today is considered as a prominent tool for sustainable business. Thank you.